Everybody, welcome back to the second to last video on our series on the 10 Commandments of Digital Missions. This one is actually going to be a very simple principle. The commandment simply reads, "Thou shalt always continue learning." Now, I'm a big supporter of continuing education and growing and learning. It's something that I try to weave into every single day that I have. And this is actually some really good news for us because learning when it comes to social media, learning is not necessarily going to be an expensive endeavor. You actually don't have to go to a college in order to learn how to implement the latest and best strategies when it comes to social media. In fact, I actually have to do a 4-year degree, and when I was studying marketing in school, I don't think I actually had a single class on digital marketing, and I'm actually quite glad that I didn't. And the reason why is simply because of this. You think about it, social media changes so very rapidly. I think one of the changes that's going on right now as this video is being recorded is that Snapchat recently updated their design and their user interface, and people are very upset about it. I think like Kylie Jenner tweeted one negative thing about Snapchat and their stock dropped by like $1.3 billion or something ridiculous. The point is though, is that social media is an always changing and always evolving game. And it's so important for us as digital missionaries to be on the cutting edge of those changes. And going to a college doesn't actually help you do that, because you think about it, by the time a social media platform has a specific update, and these are the people discover the best practices for it after a couple of weeks or months or whatever the case is, and then they disseminate that information, they write it down in a textbook. That textbook gets to go through committees and gets approved, and it finally makes it into the classroom where the teacher is able to teach it to the student. Then the student gets out of college and goes and practices it. That data, that best practices are already out of date, which is kind of crazy to think about. That's how fast social media is evolving and changing. But the great news about this is, while that might be overwhelming and it might seem crazy, the good news is that there aren't very many people paying attention to the latest changes and the latest updates for every social media platform. So what that means is that there's a lot of opportunity for people like you and for people like me. If we can pay attention, if we can do our homework, if we can do our research and be flexible enough to pivot, to adjust, and to change with the recent updates and the algorithm changes and all those different kinds of things, then you and I have the ability to be much more successful in getting our message, which is really God's message, out there to the people. And so I want to highlight in this video not only just like the need for continuing to learn and grow all the time, but really some practical resources. There are a few places that I go to consistently to get the latest up-to-date information. Thankfully, I don't have to spend so many days upon days reading through all the latest updates and go through like the long contracts that social media platforms have you sign and things like that. There are a couple places that once you go to are very valuable. They basically give it to you in a nutshell, in one video, in a short podcast, something along those lines. So there are a couple podcasts that I would really strongly, highly recommend that you become a subscriber to. They release content anywhere from once a week to every single day, and they're very valuable. The first podcast that I want to suggest to you is it's a podcast called Video Creators by a man by the name of Tim Schmoyer. Now, he also happens to have a YouTube channel, but I find a greater value out of his podcast. Cool thing about Tim is Tim actually was a youth pastor, and he ended up becoming a blogger, full-time blogger, and then eventually YouTuber. He probably runs the single most influential and most valuable YouTube channel as far as coaching and training is concerned, and he does an incredible job of helping you grow your skills in storytelling and really just how can you create a stronger connection with your audience. So Video Creators by Tim Schmoyer is a great podcast. The second podcast that I would highly recommend for you guys is to check out the Pro Church podcast by Brady Shearer. He runs a podcast. He's based out of Canada actually, and they run like a 7-figure like marketing agency for churches, and they do an incredible job. They're on like all the different social media platforms, but their podcast releases a daily tip on how to grow your social media influence from a church perspective specifically. And they answer a lot of commonly asked questions, both about the strategies and the mechanics of growing a YouTube channel, as as well as how do you take those concepts and bring them to your local church and help other people catch the vision. I really love his kind of tagline. His tagline in his podcast is basically helping you to seize the other 167 hours in a week. His basic premise is that, church happens only 1 hour out of a week. But there's 167 other hours out there that we could be doing ministry if we seize these social media platforms and use them well. So it's a great podcast I would highly, highly, highly recommend. Then we're going to go to YouTube channels. There's a couple other YouTube channels that I would really suggest. One mentor that I have for myself is a guy by the name of Sean Cannell. He's based out of Las Vegas. He runs an entire media company, but he really focuses on how you can do certain tips and tricks and gear reviews for people trying to grow their influence, growing their impact with online video, and doing it on a budget that's not super large. He really helps you find like budget lighting, budget audio, really short hacks that help you really stretch your dollar and grow your impact. He's actually a personal friend of mine, and I highly recommend that you check out his courses and his video trainings free on YouTube as well. A couple other people that are really great. Daryl Eves is another Christian in the realm. He's done a lot of consulting with businesses and Fortune 501 companies, things like that. If you've ever seen the Squatty Potty, what's it called, commercial, where it's like a unicorn basically doing soft serve, you'll know what I'm talking about. He's the guy that's helped advise a lot of those big commercials and really is great at getting viral videos out there and helping people to share the content that you put out. There's a couple other people. These ones aren't necessarily Christian, but they're good as well for good advice. Nick Nimmin and Sonny Lenarducci. Those are also some creators that I tend to follow as well and take their tips and tricks with a very serious consideration. So there you have it. There are several YouTube channels, several podcasts that you can use to grow your knowledge when it comes to social media. The way that I try to interact with all this content is I try to listen to this stuff while I'm commuting or while I'm running errands, or let's say if I'm editing a video that's not really like mind intensive, I'll put on one of their videos or something along those lines. And as long as I'm spending maybe a few minutes a day, I'm able to stay topped up on all the different knowledge that people are recommending out there. They're the ones that are studying the literature. They're the ones out there that are speaking with other creators and networking and coming up with the best practices, and they do a great job of making my life easier and hopefully yours as well. The last thing that I would really suggest for you to do is to actually connect with other creators. One of the great things about YouTube is that it's a very collaborative community. There isn't necessarily the type of competition that you would have in another business. So for example, if someone's shopping for a car, they could only buy theoretically one car. And if they were to buy, say, a Ford, that means that they couldn't buy a Mitsubishi or something along those lines. Those of you who know cars, you can say better. But when it comes to YouTube, there is no cost to view. There is no cost to subscribe. And so what happens on YouTube and other social media platforms is that those who end up succeeding the most are the ones that build a network of other like-minded creators with them. And so one of the things that I try to do actively is participate in Facebook groups, to participate in other pods and groups of like-minded creators, other Christian creators. So get out there, connect with other creators that you look up to, whose type of content you want to emulate, and people that you can actually become friends with. And as a result, you can help collaborate with each other, you can grow with each other, ask each other questions, pray for each other, and help each other learn and grow through this whole process of creating faith-based content. So there you go, a couple practical tips on how to continue growing your knowledge base and hopefully help you become a better digital missionary. I'll see you guys in our very last video on commandment number 10, thou shalt use your analytics. We'll talk about that soon. See you then. God bless.